So now in FoxVox we have variables, which are basically elements that can change dynamically over time. Variables provide the fundamental basic building block for the dynamic voice response in FoxVox. To access and set variables, there's two kinds that we have. I'm going to go up to the main command menu. When we go into edit variables, you can see that we have key variables or just command keys, and then we have just standard variables. The difference between these are the key variables can be used on command keys, and they're basically just like a command key where you can then set values for a voice recognition key. So let's set a recognition key, and let's just give it a variable name. And yes, you can use spaces in them, but for variables, I like to just keep them as single words. So we've created a variable called voice key that has two commands on it, 1 and 2. And once you've set up a voice key, you can then use that on a voice command. Let's go ahead and create a new voice command group. Let's call this variable test. And for our voice key here, we're going to add a new one. And this is going to be our variable voice key, which is actually going to put our 1 and 2 voice commands onto this command object. So to access a variable on a voice recognition, precede the name of the variable with the hashtag symbol. That will tell the software that you're using a variable and not a voice command. So by using the hashtag in front of it, it detects that it's a variable and has set it onto the voice recognition key. So now when I go into the voice recognition, on this variable test, I've got actually, I put that on. We want to call the name of the key. Variable test. Okay, so we've got one command on here, which is our voice key variable, which has the voice keys 1 and 2. So if I go ahead and turn on my voice recognition, 1. Okay, so you see command not found on variable test. Variable test, the 1 command was recognized and loaded in because that's what I had defined here, 1 or 2. So let's try again. 2, 3. Okay, so 1 and 2 are found. 3, no matching voice group was found. The command keys as variables are now loading, and I can reference that variable on as many different command keys as that I want. So that's how voice variable keys work. Okay, the other kind of variable we have are just a standard variable. And a standard variable is just a variable name with a value. And in this case, we're going to call this variable var1. Actually, we'll just call him var. I'm only going to use one variable for our demonstration here. And to give him a value, we're going to give it any value that we want. But in this case, let's give it the value of 3. What I want to do with this variable var is, you'll see here, I can actually add that onto my voice recognition key. And you can see that it detects that as a variable. And so now 1, 2, or 3 should all be mapped onto this voice key. 3, 4, 1. Okay, so in our voice recognition console, we can see that when it is finding one of the variable values, it does match. And when you speak something that hasn't been defined, it doesn't find it. So the variables are working, and you can see that I can actually link standard variables onto my voice key commands as well. And yes, I could put that directly onto here. Okay, we've created a couple of variables, and now we need to talk about how those variables are changed dynamically through the app. So what we're going to do here, I'm going to create a new voice command. And we'll call this change. And I'm going to configure an output now that's going to alter the value of our variable. I'm not going to really do anything with respect to any outputs or commands. Let's just stick with the variables. To access those, in the upper left corner, we have a little symbol for our variables. Click that and it'll open a window that deals with conditions and variable values. Okay, let's add a new variable and type in the name of our matching one. And we're going to set it to a value of 0. So also, by way of note, when setting variable values, we've been using strings, and I'm using these for setting voice command keys, which are words and phrases that are spoken, but they can also be used for triggers, and we'll get into more of the options available or how you can use them later. But if you are using numbers and you're using triggers, say for example, you could set it to a numeric value. You could also do an incrementation. So if you do a plus, you could do a +5, you could do a +1. If you're doing just a +1, all you need is the plus, and that will increment it by 1. So if the current value is 5, it'll change to 6, and so on. And of course, you can also use a minus to decrement the variable value. So if you want to jump numbers, then you can just, like I said, place the number amount that you want to change it by. So you can do addition, subtraction operations. You cannot do division or multiplication. It wasn't something I felt was really necessary to do, so I didn't implement anything for that. But again, like I said, in this case, we're going to stick with strings because we're on a voice command. Another thing also with variable execution on the output, you can choose whether the variables get set first when the output executes, or if you want to do it last at the end of the output. This can be important if, for example, you put a delay. If you put a pause and some sort of a delay on the output execution, you want the variable then to change after that delay. You can set the timing to do it by making it last. So you have a little bit of control as to how those update on the commands. Okay, so anyway, this one's going to change it to 0. So currently, with the value being 3, we should be able to say 3 change. And that will change the 3 into 0, and then the 3 change command will no longer function. When it's no longer functioning, we'll try the 0 change, and that one should work. So let's give it a test. Three change. 3 change. 0 change. Okay, so there you can see when I execute the command, 3 was executed, then it was no longer found, and 0 was executed as it had swapped over. So that's how we can change variables by using our output commands. Okay, so you can see how variables can be used to dynamically change your voice keys and what you recognize and what you say. But another important thing that they can do is also decide when something can execute. And they can affect various things like voice commands, key outputs, and outputs directly. To do this, what we need to do is set up what we call a condition. So conditions are basically when variables meet a certain value, then a condition will be met, allowing execution. So you'll notice next to the Add New Voice Key, we have a new button here called New Condition Group. Let's go ahead and click that. That's going to open up a new condition set where we can then add variables. If you mouse over the condition set, you'll notice that within a condition set, all variables or conditions must be satisfied. So let's go ahead and add our variable. And let's make it true when our variable equals 3, which was our initial value. And you can see the status of a variable with the little dots on a condition. If you hover over it, that will indicate you can actually see what its current value is. And green means that it's true. And if you change it to something else on the status, then you're gonna see that that change as well. Okay, so let's see. Let's put it back to equal. Okay, so when variable equals 3, we're going to execute this new voice command, and it's going to change our variable on our output here to 0. So it should work one time, but after we execute it the first time, then it shouldn't go again. So let's go ahead and put a sound on our command so we can see that happening a little bit, or actually hear that happening a little bit easier. So let's just go here to our sounds. And one thing I'll point out here as well, something new in this update, and that is if you look at the path when you reference sounds, that it becomes a reference path with a dot. It actually is referenced based on the library that you're at. So that's kind of a new convenient thing, so that if you ship a library and you're including assets that it's linking to, as long as those assets are included in the same subdirectory as where the library is located, those sounds will be they'll be found. So it's no longer an absolute path, unless of course the path doesn't actually point to a subdirectory within relative to the FoxVox library, in which case it will be a hard-coded path. But just pointing that little feature out there. Okay, so we've got our conditions set up. So now with our test, let's go ahead and make a change. Call out one change. We should see the command, the variable will change to 0. It'll go ahead and execute. We'll get a confirmation, but then when we say one change again, it should fail to execute. Here we go. One change.
Loud and clear, sir. Help me.
One change. Okay, so there you can see that the command executed the first time, and then it didn't find it, and you can see that the dots changed. Now that I've disengaged the voice, it's reset to its initial value of back to 3, so it's back to green. So since I've turned it off, we can do it again, but here we go. One change.
Loud and clear, sir. Help me.
One change. Okay, so you can see here, if I don't reset, our variable is now equivalent to 0. This condition is no longer viable, and so it doesn't execute, and it doesn't find that the voice command because it's not available. Okay, so conditions can be applied to an entire command, but they can also be applied individually onto outputs themselves. To do this, go on the output into the variables area, and you'll see here that we can add in conditions as well. And those conditions will determine whether or not the command itself can execute. So you can actually have conditions for the group, but you can also have conditions set on individual commands based within the group. So a lot of flexibility there that lets us do a lot of stuff. So now that we've kind of introduced conditions, one more thing that I need to mention with respect to those, and that is when you have multiple variables assigned on a condition set, it's required that all conditions must be met. So if you have something that's not true in any of these conditions, then the entire condition set evaluates to false. So if you want to do an OR statement, what you can do is just always add another condition set with another set of variables. And so if either condition set, this one or this one, is met, then the command will execute. But if only a single condition, if either condition, both conditions evaluate to false, then it won't be executed. So that's how you can do your and or just based on different condition sets that you assign onto the variable key. I'm going to switch over now from the voice commands because, of course, we have our key input as well. We can certainly use all of the same things on our key inputs. So here you can see on the inputs that we can set conditions and variables. But there's something unique about key inputs that the voice inputs don't support, and that is execution with only a condition set. So in this case, let's go ahead and take a variable, and let's go with our variable again. And let's just say when our variable equals 3, let's give it another voice output command. Okay, so when our variable, which is currently set at 3, we should hear an output command. With voice input, in order to actuate, you actually must speak a command. But on a key input, as soon as I enable this, because there's no required key inputs as well, combined with this particular condition, the condition will be met, and the command output will be executed. Let's go ahead and show you.
Clear forward and aft. Ready for start 2.
Okay, so you notice that I clicked it. As soon as I enabled the key, the command became active immediately, but it did only execute the one time. The variable is still set to true, and it will activate anytime that the variable changes back to active. So until this variable changes into a false value and then back into a true, this command won't re-execute, but it will execute immediately because no other inputs. So that's kind of nice, because if you want to be able to have one, let's not give it an input. Let's set a variable. Let's say whenever this var equals zero, we'll execute this, and then we'll go ahead and say make this command here change that variable to 0. And let's give it a different output.
Clear forward and aft. Ready for start 2. Clear forward and aft. Ready for start 2.
Okay, they actually did. Let's put a delay here. So that we can actually hear that second one running. Okay.
Clear forward and aft. Ready for start 2. Copy.
Okay, so there you can see that the first one executed as soon as I enabled the keys, which then updated the command, cascaded into the second one, which then executed. And the two voice, of course, were conflicting, so we only heard the one, but by putting a delay, we could hear the second command executing. So now that we've introduced conditions and seeing how we can set various conditions on both key, voice, and output commands, next thing I want to talk about is plugins and the utilization of plugin variables. So to access a plugin, up here next to the settings, we've got a little plug. Click that, and you'll see here that we're going to be able to select a plugin. Let's go ahead and browse here. Let's go back up into an assemblies. In this case, I'm going to choose the F4 shared mem DLL, which accesses BMS shared memory. Go ahead and click open on that. Once you've loaded that, you'll be able to select a method that's available from within the assembly that you can use for dynamically loading variables. In the case, the most commonly used one here is going to be the get current data. We're going to go ahead and take a look at that. There's a prefix option, which basically, if you have variables on, you can have multiple plugins loaded, and if you have variable conflicts between the plugins, you can put a prefix in front of the variable name so that they can be distinguished uniquely on each plugin. We're going to leave it blank for now since we're only dealing with the one plugin. And finally, we have a poll, which is the interval at which this method is going to be invoked and updated. In the case, it's set by default to 1 second intervals. So each second it's updating. You can drop that down to as low as 100 is the limit that I've set it at. Or you can do it as or less frequently, but depends on how fast you need that data to be updated and how much of an overhead that really is. In the case of this, it's quite low, so we could easily do, I've run it at 300, 500 millisecond updates, but I didn't need anything faster than a 1 second. So again, higher number here will take a little bit of load off the CPU and leave it available for the game. So don't over poll if you don't need to. Okay, so we got that. And then when the plugin is on, it's going to be running and doing the poll every 1 second, but while it's off, it's not going to be. So we're going to leave it off for the moment. But now that we have it, let's go ahead and click on this button here, which is going to allow us to view the variables. So it's going to open and then parse the assembly that we have. And then here you're going to see the same thing in the window. So we can control it from here as well. And then here you can see the different variables that it has detected from within the plugin and their current value. Now I'm not running BMS currently, so as it's looking at the shared memory, it's not pulling any values, so everything's set to null currently. but I can see that I've got access to all the variables that are being presented through the DLL. And there's a little search function here. We can look here. I'm going to do a search here. We're going to look at, we can see the BMS version number is also applied as a variable. So we could, on our command input, set a variable. Let's just say that we wanted this to execute only if the version number was a certain level. And let's go ahead and drag out, let's just say the minor version level. Okay, and since we don't see the variables, let me go ahead and, on another monitor, I'm going to go ahead and launch up BMS so we can see something come up. And I'm going to click refresh. Since it's off, it's not refreshing, but when I refresh, you can see it loaded the values from the shared memory. And let's see that we got the minor version is 3.7 and the micro version is 2, so 3.7, so 4.37.2. So we're going to say that the minor version has to be greater than or equal to 3.7. And you can see that the value of it currently, which is 37, is true. If we set that to a 38, then it's going to be false. Okay, and I can also type these in. Now, if I had string variables or anything that's on here that I wanted to tie into my voice command groups, we will be able to do that. And I think that's going to be an upcoming major part of some future releases in BMS, where we're going to be able to get some call sign information coming through. And hopefully we'll be able to tie those into the voice keys and groups as well. But for now, anything that's basically in here is available for use as variables. So if you wanted to do something based on oil pressure, for example, you could do it based on an oil pressure gauge. So if you wanted to do something based on other types of operational data on BMS, then these are all available. So you set a number of triggers and different things that you want to do. So those are all available to you in FoxVox now with the use of plugins. And let's see, that's, again, you can have multiple plugins. So you can support different versions of BMS or different versions of that particular for shared mem DLL. Just by way of note, the plugin feature is fairly new, and I've tested it with certain versions of the for shared mem. And there might be some other DLLs. I'm not sure how well that's updated and supported. It seems to be fairly up to date, but I know that some of the data with the BMS devs are always working on making modifications and updates. Those might need to be updated, but anyone producing could compile the F4 shared mem DLL and add any new features or functionalities to it to be able to make that work. So also within the for shared mem data, you might have desire to access some of the other information as well. So, oops, didn't pick that. Let's pull that up. So you're going to see here, we're going to have different information based on which module we're pulling the information from. Okay, so anyway, all those variables are now available. And basically with that, with the ability to have conditions and the ability to have all the plugin variables that are dynamically updating, you can bind actions and responses to joystick commands. So when you move your flight stick or when you press buttons on your joysticks or key inputs, you can do it based on voice commands or things that you speak. And you can also do it off of operational statistics or operational values from the plugin. So we pretty much have full support of anything you want to do in FoxVox now. There's basically nothing you can't do when you're setting up. So when we talk about Bogey Dope's new virtual crew chief, and for the great work that he did in that for use with voice attack, we can apply all the same features and functionality right into FoxVox. The great thing is with FoxVox, no coding or scripting is required. All you got to do is drag and drop, set up your variables and conditions, and build your pit crew your crew chief interactions, however you'd like to do it. So now that we've gone over variables, conditions, plugins, and how they interrelate to each other, and the functionality, the dynamic configurations you can now get out of FoxVox by utilizing all of those different parts to create changing voice command, key command structure. I wanted to talk about a couple other things and do a little demo putting it all together to kind of wrap this up. In the previous version of, in the latest version of FoxVox, just before this update, I added in the ability to set command sounds on voice groups that didn't have a matching command. And on the library, there was a not recognized sound, which would play if it didn't hear what you had heard. But there's been a lot of enhancements in this update to those as well. One of them is when you set the not recognized sound, which you can actually select multiple sounds and apply all of those sounds onto the library. So what will happen is when it's not recognized, it will choose between one of the selected sounds that have been put on there and play one at random. So that's definitely been enhanced. But in addition, sometimes the only thing I didn't like about this was with the default libraries, there's no way to assign push to talk with that as well. So if you're just talking and the command's not found, if it's not found on a command group, you're either going to have to get a response, but there's no way to say, you know what, I only want to get that response if it's using push to talk. So that's been fixed in this update. And I'll kind of show you what we can do here. To do that, what I'm going to do is go ahead and create a new voice command group. And this is going to be for unrecognized. And I'm not going to assign any keys to this. What I'm going to do is on the command not recognized sound, I'm going to go ahead and set, let's go back up to our demo. Let's go into our virtual. Okay, we could assign this right here. I'll just kind of show you several different ways. So we could assign that here, so whenever this unrecognized command is played, we'll hear that. And we can associate a push to talk on this. So anytime I'm talking to the crew chief, let's just say I'm going to engage the mic, then this is going to respond to me. So let's test it out. I shouldn't get anything here. Now I should get something.
Sorry, sir. Say again.
And he didn't hear me.
I apologize, sir. Say last.
Okay, so we can set that on a group, but we can actually be even more flexible than that. Let's go ahead and remove the sounds from here. What we're going to do is we're going to create a voice command. And this is a no engine. So I'm not going to assign any voice keys here. What I'm going to do is just go ahead and play. We're going to set a command sound. Let's put our say again, no start here. And let's go ahead and add a condition onto this group. So no engine. Actually, we're going to change it. Let's do it engine on. If the engine on is not equal to true, okay, so we've got our push to talk set on this sound, and without an engine, we have those sounds. And what we're going to do, let's duplicate this command. Let's go change our sounds to the engine running. And let's go ahead and talk with our chief. This is going to be a how are you? do no engine. Now, something else just kind of show you here. You're setting up sounds. One of the things you can do, if you want them on the outputs, you can do them on the outputs. And an easy way to do that again is you can just go to your file explorer and actually just drag them on. And if you do that, you're going to get, it'll automatically create your outputs for you with the sounds. And then what you could do, you can go into each one of them and set up a chance of which one's occurring and order them particularly. And you could weight them so that some would have a higher chance than others. But in the new version, it's a little easier. Again, we can just assign the command sound here. And let's go to our sounds. How's Chief? Let's set all of our sounds here. And let's add our condition. Okay, and our engine on. Currently it's true because it doesn't have a value, so it's not true. And let's duplicate this. And let's change our sounds for when the engine's on. That did get them all right, yeah. Okay, so when the engine's on. So now when we talk to our chief, but what we don't have on this command is if it does get onto the chief command, but it doesn't find one, we're not going to hear anything. Because we don't have an unrecognized sound on this guy. We could put it on the chief command here as well, but what I want to do is actually take these commands and I want to put them over onto the chief command. Did I just put the same one on? No, this is... didn't name them correctly. Okay, so we've got a no engine, engine on, and let's forget to rename this one. Okay, so now we're going to get different responses. We should be able to hear our chief when he doesn't hear us. If we are addressing him on this command, we'll hear it. Also, we'll hear it if it doesn't get onto any group, he'll repeat it. But again, only in the situation that we're using our push to talk in order to speak with him. So let's put it all together and see how it works. So first, if I'm just talking and it's hearing me, no response from chief because I haven't engaged him with the push to talk. Now if I'm talking and I don't speak with him, but I am engaged on the comms.
I apologize, sir. Say last.
He doesn't understand what we're saying, so. Chief, how are you?
Oh, I'm having a great day. How are you?
Doing good, thanks.
I apologize, sir. Say again.
Yeah, so getting the response here. Now let's, if we switch our value, let's just say we engage our throttle, or let's just say we have it tied to our plug-in variable that tells us our engine's on. Chief, how are you?
Been a long day, sir. But I'm doing all right.
That's great, but you don't know what I'm saying, do you?
I'm sorry, sir. Say again.
Okay, so now that our engine's on, we have a different background sound. So anyway, it's very, very flexible, very easy to do. You can see I can set up these commands, get different voice responses, get different sounds based on conditions, based on timing, based on variables. Pretty much everything you want to do with a virtual crew chief. So I'm sorry I don't have a full library set up right now for the virtual crew chief. I'm still working on it, but I've been busy implementing the programming necessary to support it. I wanted to be able to do this without having to have it pre-programmed on, and notice there's no scripting, no script writing, no programming, no coding. You can just do it through configurations and pull it all in. So again, doing it the FoxVox way, trying to keep it easy and achieve the functionality we're looking for. So hope you like it. And just by way of heads up, I am working on the next update already. It should be coming out fairly soon, but it will be adding some more significant enhancements as part of this new FoxVox Unleashed 2.0 series. So hope you look forward to it, and thanks for all your support. Good luck. A couple of things that I need to follow up on at the end of this video after making a few revisions. I need to mention a few things, and also realize that I forgot to say a couple things. First off, earlier in the video where I split out these commands because we've got a series of different sounds that are being executed. And remember, when we went to go create commands, that we couldn't put multiple files onto a single command. I kind of reflected on that a little bit and decided that I think that we want to be able to do that just to simplify things. So I've gone ahead and made a revision in the software. So now you can go ahead and assign it on the output command multiple files. So by creating an output with the multiple files that you're going to play on it, you can simply combine the two onto one and get rid of having to do both. And you can go ahead and put your engine on condition right into the command itself. So on the output, set the engine on equal true. And then we could do on the other output, engine on is not equal to true. That's supported. I'm going to go ahead and make that change because I just thought it was a lot cleaner to be able to do that. So just a little correction to what was said earlier in the video. So at the release, that new command functionality is going to be supported just to be able to simplify things. Also, with respect to this, I did want to mention as well, when you have a command that's tied to a push to talk, you can also create one that's not tied to a push to talk, which becomes the default output group for the library, which will then override again your not recognized phrases over here. So if we added in another voice command group, let's put that one at the top. This would be our default fallback with no push to talk. So if push to talk is engaged, this would be the fallback. But if no push to talk was engaged, then this could be the default fallback for the entire library. And yes, you can put voice commands on those. You can put them on both. So you don't have to do just a key that doesn't have voice keys. You could add another one as well to capture anything, and it becomes a fallback. And as long as your phrase has those keys then would be executed and it would be found on that command. So just by way of clarification, didn't make that really clear in the video. So the other thing that I wanted to mention here was that there are other ways that you can restructure this library to achieve what you're looking to do as well. Instead of making the commands and conditions on the same command, another really good way of approaching the issue between the engine on, engine off groups would be to create another voice command group. And inside of that one, put all of your engine on keys. And so basically you would have no engine on this command group, and then have all of your engine on commands inside of this one. And then what you do is you set up a configuration. So you could have your default be your engine on, then you could say, I'm sorry, engine off, and then you change it to engine on. And on the engine on, you could then disable this command. And if we go back to the default and we disable the engine on, so by default the engine starts off, and then we have these commands, and then when you turn the engine on, and then you basically on an output command switch your configuration to the engine on configuration and do it that way. So which way is better? I haven't really decided. Need to set up, I think, go further into the configuration on the virtual crew chief in order to be able to really make a determination as to which way I would do it. Either one would work, and there's a lot of flexibility. Again, I would go with whichever one would in the end be the least amount of maintenance and the less amount of confusion, which would probably, I think, tend towards doing them on different commands. I think it makes sense when the engine turns on that you cycle into a different configuration, and then have all of your commands tied to that. It just seems a little bit cleaner to me, which is why I wanted to bring it up. So again, just a couple of last minute things I wanted to bring up and share about how you can do things with FoxVox. So thanks.